Celebrating 46 years on the air, award-winning Farmweek is a production of Mississippi State University Extension.
Today on Farmweek, rolling fork rising from the rubble of a massive tornado in March. Plus, Zach heads back to Amory, Mississippi, where a Christmas crop makes memories and money. In Southern gardening, kale isn't just a fancy garnish in restaurants, it's fancy in the landscape too. And in our feature, a robot designed to make grain bin safety a lot more possible. Farmweek starts right now.
Hello everyone, I'm Zach Ashmore.
And I'm Mike Russell. Once again, good to have you with us again here on Farm Week. Merry Christmas. First up this week, a story we'll be following in more detail after the first of the year. A program in Mississippi to help home renters who survived the rolling fork tornado in March become home owners. And it's being followed and supported by the popular TV morning news show, Good Morning America. GMA rolled into town for a third time just a few days ago, where hosts Robin Roberts and Sam Champion showcased Mississippi's home ownership program known as Rolling Fork Rising. Turns out that 68% of the 1,800 residents of Rolling Fork were renters. And when the tornado hit, for them, rebuilding wasn't possible. Enter Britt Williamson, pastor of First Baptist Church in Rolling Fork, who also has a keen mind for numbers and business. With the help of Mississippi State, classes were put together for those who wanted to qualify for a low-cost home ownership program. And at this point, 17 lots on 18 acres are being developed. On GMA, supported by the sponsorship of 84 Lumber, a family-owned building materials company, two families were given the keys to their very own homes currently being built. At least one of those houses will be finished by Christmas. We will meet many of those involved in Rolling Fork Rising in the weeks ahead. Mississippi's largest general ag organization, Farm Bureau, had its 101st annual meeting recently. It is one of the most important gatherings among many each year. Two speakers had much to say, Kayleigh McEnany, now with Fox News, who has ties to Mississippi, and Mississippi Ag Commissioner Andy Gibson. Among many topics, both discussed the environmental lobby and both had strong opinions.
We've got to push back on that radical agenda. The people in Europe are suffering under a radical environmental agenda like the one I just described to you. And they have practically shut down farming in Europe. The people over in Europe are facing regulations that have made it practically impossible to farm. And I want you to know today, I know you already know this, your policy team does, there are people who think like that in Washington, D.C. They see agriculture as the enemy, and they would love nothing more than to shut down our ability to produce food, fiber, and shelter in this country. We got to push back on that.
And my dad said to me, he said, make sure when you're there, you talk about national security, because national security is food security. And all that you do in this country, he said, what more important national security issue is there than being able to produce your own food, being able to produce your own meat? And he's exactly right about that. He said it's at least among the top three, which is why I was stunned when this week on Outnumbered, I host the noon show there at Fox News. I get this story. United Nations agency reportedly wants Americans to eat less meat in the name of climate change. But as it turns out, when I did some research, American agriculture is responsible for 1.4% of global emissions, 1.4%. China, meanwhile, the #1 emitter of CO2, we emit just about half of what China does, but I will echo House GOP Ag Chairman Glenn Thompson in saying, the world needs American farmers and ranchers much more than they need the United Nations. I think that's exactly right.
In other news, oh Christmas tree. Forestry is big business here in Mississippi, but Christmas trees are an important part of that picture too, especially this time of year.
A few years ago, I visited the Worthy Christmas Tree Farm in Amory. This year, I went back. Here's a look at the business side. This time of year certainly has a magical feeling. With cold weather setting in, thoughts go towards family and tradition. One of the oldest is the Christmas tree.
These beautiful decorations have their own unique history, but who grows them? Why do they do it? And what does the Christmas tree business look like?
It's not something many people would think about. Christmas tree farmers are like many other tree farmers across the state and the U.S. They face similar problems to those who grow pine trees or decorative ornamentals. Technically, that's exactly what the Christmas tree is, an ornamental.
Our Christmas trees that we grow now were started as ornamental purposes like landscape break-ins, wind breaks, all that kind of stuff. And before that, they were growing pine trees, Virginia pine, Scotch pine, that we grew here at the farm. And they moved to Leland cypress due to disease purposes because the tip moth would get on the pine trees. Because on pine trees, if you planted 1,000, you lost 500.
So it takes about 5 years to really get into the business. Your process is we have to start like in January of going out to the fields, and it's called propagation. So we actually take cuttings off the trees, and so those cuttings are rooted for the next year's trees. So that's kind of year, I guess, one in the greenhouse. Year two is when you actually plant that particular tree in your field. And so there's like basal pruning, all kind of different prunings that you have to do to get that tree ready, established, and all that. And then after that, you have to shear the trees twice a year. You got to spray fungicide every 21 days. It's a lot to it just in that between like the year 2 and year 5, to kind of keep them growing and fertilize them.
Although they don't hang over your head like a forest of pine, the Christmas tree business is a serious thing. Here in the Southeast, they have associations where growers can give and get advice.
We have like 3 or 4 states are kind of involved into the Southern Christmas Tree Association here. And so we have like our own little community that we can kind of, if we're needing help, any guidance or anything, we have people that can help us there. So once a year we all get together at either Louisiana, Alabama, or Mississippi, kind of one place or another, and we all get together and just have like a big convention. And so we kind of pick each other's brain, if we're having trouble with something or like that, we can always ask. Because we have some older growers in our association, so they've been there and done that. They really know, what to do and what not to do.
It's no secret that people in the Christmas tree business take special care of the traditions in the event of a family picking out the perfect tree for themselves. It's good to know that those who grow the trees truly care.
Good to get back. Next week in our feature show, I take a longer look at the Worthy Christmas Tree Farm. It's still a place where families are making memories.
You've heard of kale. It has a bit of a mixed reputation, at least where eating it is concerned, but ornamental kale is a whole other story in the landscape. Here's Eddie Smith with some varieties you may not have heard of, and they're perfect for this time of year.
Today, Southern Gardening is in the trial gardens at the South Mississippi Branch Experiment Station in Poplarville, Mississippi, admiring some beautiful ornamental kale. Peacock white kale is a variety of kale that has green, feathery, serrated outer leaves with intricate white veins that resemble the pattern of a peacock feather. Its inner feathery leaves are white with a faint tint of pink. In contrast, peacock red kale has dark greenish-purple feathery serrated outer leaves with intricate purple veins. Its inner feathery serrated leaves are a bright shade of purple. The color of the leaves intensifies in cooler temperatures. Crystal red kale is another stunning, beautiful variety of kale that adds a pop of color to any landscape. The center leaves are characterized by magnificent glossy red and purple hues that are sure to catch the eye. The outer glossy green leaves with reddish purple veins frame the colorful center of this plant. One of my favorites, Osaka IQ red kale, is a vibrant and beautiful variety of kale with dark grayish purple outer leaves that have a reddish purple center. The leaves have a slightly ruffled texture and are relatively large and flat with bright reddish-purple veins. All of these varieties have frilly leaves framed with colorful centers, much like flower petals, and definitely stand out in the fall and winter landscape. I'm Eddie Smith, and I will see you next time on Southern Gardening.
We'll take a break right here, but don't go away. Coming up in our Farm Week feature, a new invention to save lives on the farm. Everyone knows how dangerous grain bins are. You could be completely submerged in 20 seconds and you could suffocate. But now a father-son team in Nebraska has built a robot to keep you safe. One robot can handle up to 250,000 bushels. It's called the Grain Weevil, and some are calling it the final frontier. That's coming up on Farm Week. Don't go away.
I believe in people and their hopes, their aspirations and their faith, and their right to make their own plans and arrive at their own decisions, and their ability and power to enlarge their lives and plan for the happiness of those they love. I believe that education, of which extension work is an essential part, is basic in stimulating individual initiative, self-determination, and leadership. That these are the keys to democracy, and that people, when given facts they understand, will act not only in their self-interest, but also in the interest of society. Because I believe these things, I am an extension professional.
I believe in people and their hopes, their aspirations, and their faith. I believe in intellectual freedom to search for and present the truth without bias and with courteous tolerance toward the views of others. I believe that education is a lifelong process, and the greatest university is the home. That my success as a teacher is proportional to those qualities of mind and spirit that give me welcome entrance to the homes of the families I serve. Because I believe these things, I am an extension professional.
Time for the market report. A sweet load last week.
And that's because sugar futures are sinking. We'll get into it, but first, the numbers. What were last week's biggest gains and losses? And then this month's WASDE report. What did it say and what did we learn? And finally, we take a deeper look into the sugar market to see why current prices are high, yet futures are low. So, markets closed last week on the downswing, both livestock and row crops affected. Let's take a look. Last week's biggest gain, wheat again, up 29 cents, a near 5% rise from the previous week. Last week's biggest loss, sugar again, down nearly 1 3/4 cents, which is a near 7% drop from the previous week. We'll get into the reasons shortly. This month's WASDE report dropped last week, and as usual, it gives us some insight into supplies and production of ag commodities on both the domestic and global scale. Here's what it said.
U.S. wheat supplies unchanged from last month. Exports up, particularly in soft red winter wheat to China. Ending stocks down. Season average farm price $7.30 per bushel. Global wheat supplies and consumption raised. Trade raised 2.2 million tons on higher exports by Australia, U.S., Canada, and Ukraine. Ending stocks reduced 500,000 tons. U.S. corn exports up 25 million bushels, ending stocks down 25 million bushels. Season average farm price, $4.85 per bushel. Global corn production up in Russia, Ukraine, the EU, and Egypt. Exports also raised for Ukraine, U.S., and Turkey. U.S. rice supplies up, exports unchanged. Ending stocks up 1 million hundredweight. Season average farm price, $17.80 per hundredweight. Global rice supplies raised mostly due to higher production in Thailand. Consumption mostly unchanged. Trade down and ending stocks up, but still the lowest since 2017. U.S. soybean supply and use projections unchanged from last month. Season average farm price $12.90 per bushel. Global soybean production lowered mostly due to Brazil, down 2 million tons. Ending stocks down slightly. U.S. red meat and poultry production up with higher pork and broiler and slightly lower turkey. Beef and egg production unchanged from last month. U.S. milk production lowered from last month due to less milk per cow. Cheese and butter prices lowered while non-fat dry milk price raised and whey unchanged. 2023 all milk price forecast $20.60 per hundredweight. U.S. cotton production down, mostly due to lower Texas crop. Meal use also down, the lowest since 1984. Season average farm price 77 cents per pound. Global cotton consumption down, mostly due to China, Turkey, U.S., and Mexico. Production and exports lower, while ending stocks up.
Now that we have some context, what are the experts talking about? Well, in row crops, wheat prices up makes sense considering the drought in wheat country. Add to that the latest WASDE. Analyst Elaine Cubb says the biggest crop to watch is soybeans.
Wheat doesn't have a lot of a North American story at this point. We got our last big look at the conditions for the winter wheat crop before it goes into dormancy, and it says 50% good to excellent rating. That's better than last year, but of course Kansas is still largely in either moderate to extreme drought. So you know, we're just unknown, and we're just going to have to paddle along here for the next few months. We certainly get the sense that the market and the end users certainly believe in these numbers from the USDA, that there is an abundance of corn out there at 175 effectively bushels per acre. And that may change as we get into December and January, and we get some measurements, some surveyed measurements of how much supply is really out there. But for the time being, this is what the market is trading. We see the biggest reaction in the futures markets in the soybeans rather than the corn when the day-to-day weather forecast changes for South America. That has been the case for the past several weeks. There has been more volatility in the soybeans, and certainly in the price ratio for what is effectively old crop soybeans to corn now. It's these nearby contracts that you have, the big boost for soybeans, that they're overpriced compared to corn. So it's being priced into soybeans certainly more than corn. It's relatively quiet. We have moved past that harvest time frame when there's a lot of commercial activity going in there and hedging as they're buying, from the farmers or hedging needs for the upcoming year. So it's just a quieter market at this time of year, and seasonally that's okay. We have a period of time where we might put in a harvest low and move up from here.
If you've been to the grocery store lately, you might have noticed that sugar is more expensive. Yet, despite the hike, sugar futures are dropping significantly, as you saw earlier. This didn't make sense to me, so I looked into it and found we have a sugar shortage, but relief is quickly on the way.
According to NASDAQ, the drop in sugar prices has to do with ramped-up production in Brazil, which is solving a current sugar supply issue and could even create an oversupply. In essence, despite a shortage right now, futures are low because we're looking at ample supplies soon. So, why are we low on sugar right now? Well, heavy rain in Europe has flooded fields used for sugar beets, especially in France, the EU's largest sugar beet producing country. And almost 50% of France's sugar beets are still sitting in flooded fields unable to be harvested. If the fields don't dry out soon, the beets could be damaged by frost and the crop will be a wash, so to speak. Thailand, another major sugar producer and exporter, is suffering from drought, which has limited production this year. An El Niño weather system is set to continue dry conditions in the coming year. Therefore, price is growing right now, but the futures are lower because it looks like low supply is temporary.
So, at the end of the day, looks like sugar supplies are low at the moment, but Brazil is set to flood the market. And that's our deeper look this week. Supplies and stocks, the big news going into Christmas. We'll see how it plays out. Mike?
Thank you, Zach. Grain bins are a common sight in rural America. You see them almost everywhere you go. Unfortunately, stories of grain bin injury and even death are common as well. But a new invention is aimed at reducing that risk. Josh Bittner has the story.
Bin rescue is very dangerous. It doesn't happen that often. Low frequency, high risk is what we call it. Very labor intensive. You can't just have them come in from the door, because what does that do? The grain comes down on them, right? So if you got a bad situation and then you just make it worse with this cascading grain.
Chief Tony Bestwick heads up the fire department in York, Nebraska. Besides battling blazes, his crew has struggled to rescue farm workers trapped in grain bins. Given even a rapid response, the threat of suffocation looms.
It's a very stressful situation.
Experts say an adult can be submerged in a grain bin filled with corn or soybeans in as little as 20 seconds, a tragedy some on the farm know all too well.
Someone in their family or a neighbor or somebody they know, I think just about every farmer that is around grain bins has a story of someone they know that's lost their life in a grain bin.
Safety is top of mind for fifth-generation Nebraska row crop producer Zach Honeycutt. He was just a child when his grandfather's brother died in a grain bin accident. Today, Honeycutt follows proper protocols when moving harvested raw commodities out of storage for buyers. But one momentous trip to town helped launch a homegrown tech startup whose mission became no boots in the grain.
We were building a robot, and we were showing that to people at church and showed that to a family friend of ours who farms. And he said, if you can build that robot, you should build me a robot to keep me and my kids out of the grain bin.
Ben Johnson and his father Chad had never set foot in a grain bin before they invented the grain weevil, an autonomous robot that cruises through grain loads on a pair of mini augers, busting up clumps and surface crusting to maintain profitable product. They say their machine also minimizes lung complications and combustion issues associated with concentrated grain dust.
I like to tell people it's like every dad's dream to build robots with their kid. And people look at me kind of funny and said, okay, every nerd dad's dream.
With a love of robotics fostered by his educator father, Ben earned a degree in electrical engineering from the University of Nebraska, Omaha. Their business went from father and son building prototypes at home in small-town Aurora to a shop in the state's largest metro area with 7 full-time employees and 6 patents in the works.
This is 3 years of our work. It started in the shed, just putting it together with whatever we had, and then now you can see we've really grown the team and been able to engineer this thing to be powerful and capable inside the bin.
Grain Weevil assures one robot alone can manage up to 250,000 bushels. They're currently working to earn key safety certifications they claim will unleash a monetized ecosystem between insurance, finance, farmers, and ancillary businesses.
Take 1 bushel of grain and follow that along the supply chain. We can actually capitalize on that 1 bushel of grain on the farm, at the co-ops, in the transportation, at the food processing facilities, all have use cases for the robot.
For Honeycutt, whose own grain bins have been used as proving ground for the grain weevil, it's an idea that came home to roost.
It's just been cool to see that evolution. We've created a lot of technological solutions in other places on the farm to protect us from unnecessary risks, and this is one of the final frontiers.
We try to find the most current research on keeping the grain in good quality at conferences like this, whether it's through just management techniques or if we can remove the human from hazardous situations. Using a robot to do that would be a great example.
University of Nebraska Medical Center Associate Professor Dr. Aaron Yoder performs grain bin safety outreach on behalf of his institution's Central States Center for Agricultural Safety and Health. Grain Weevil sought his expertise on compliance, along with Nationwide Insurance, the country's largest agricultural insurer. Nationwide conducts an annual Grain Bin Safety Week to raise awareness about the dangers of working in and around the structures. The company has donated rescue tubes to various fire departments across the U.S., including York, Nebraska.
I don't think there's probably any producer out there that doesn't know the risk. It's just they're willing to take more risk than some other people. And when I see things like that, I get tremendously sad because we know it could be preventable.
UNMC's Nebraska farm fatality and injury statistics 2012 to 2020 show 13 grain bin related cases, with 9 deaths a direct result of stored grain engulfment. This past July, another casualty occurred less than an hour west of York, near Grand Island.
Oftentimes people will go inside the bin to either check the quality of the grain or to do something if it goes out of condition. It gets lumpy, it gets moldy, they'll go inside to try to break up some of those blockages that might prevent the grain from flowing.
Purdue University tracks a broader scope of fatal and non-fatal grain entrapment cases nationally. They recently found a 45% increase, higher than the 5-year average, in incidents between 2021 and 2022. In Husker country, the sense of urgency is palpable.
We've got to hurry. We've got to do this as fast as we possibly can. But we can't. We have to do it right. It takes a lot to develop a machine this complicated. So it really does motivate us, though. It keeps us pushing. It keeps us moving forward, because we know every 2 weeks that we don't get one done, somebody's losing a father or a son or a mother that's in there helping. It's tough.
First responders caution there is no one-size-fits-all solution in the field, where improvising comes with the territory. For Chief Bestwick, proactive measures are another addition to the toolbox.
Anything that we can do to make it safer for ourselves or our producers, we're all for. There's no better feeling in the world to know that you took part in a team effort to save a life.
Amazing technology, and it'll definitely be put to good use. Well, next week we have visited the Worthy Christmas Tree Farm in Amory. A look back. Now Zach flashes forward with an extended trip back to the farm.
Before you can decorate it, light it up, or stash presents under it, you've got to find your Christmas tree. I venture back to Amory, and just like before, boy, are those beauties worthy.
Go behind the scenes where traditions are still being born. That's next time on Farmweek.
Remember, if you missed a story, look for past episodes of Farmweek on our website at farmweek.tv.
And don't forget to follow us on Facebook and YouTube. See you next week. Thanks for watching. Merry Christmas.